God spoke, and creation burst into being. From nothing, out of nothing, He made everything. Abel brought his best. God saw it and blessed. Enoch pleased God. He had a single heart and sought to honour and obey. He did not taste death. God just took him away. When Noah built an ark with solid frame, he trusted God to send the rain. He knew his family would be preserved, whilst others got what they deserved. God's plan to continue the ancient line meant Noah's family would be just fine. The animals climbed onto the boat, but it was God who made the vessel float. So when we're faced with impossible odds, trust God to preserve us in the flood. Abraham walked the road to reach his new abode. His life was lived in tents, temporary housing for him was meant. His eyes were fixed on God, who promised a great, big family. You're gonna need a much bigger tent, Abe. God would be the builder and Abe's faith would become bolder. Sarah laughed at first, but as her belly grew, so did her spiritual thirst. She knew God's promise was true, and from that her family grew and grew and grew and grew. Let's just pause here and reflect on what God does. He looks for devotion and trust. Looking forward into the unknown is a must. We should do it without fear. When He calls us forward, He is always near. So, getting back to Abraham. Abraham continued in trust. God commanded a sacrifice. When Isaac on the altar was laid, no moment of doubt in Abraham was displayed. Would the promise end with the death of his son? Somehow he knew with God it had just begun. When things don't make sense, we are called to trust. Knowing God will work it out is an absolute must. The blessing continues through Isaac to Jacob and Jacob to Joseph's sons, like an avalanche of faith, gathering speed down through the generations. It tumbles towards the future, when fulfillment of God's promise of redemption would burst into the world. Now it's Moses' turn. Now here's a man with no identity crisis and a vision into the future. Suffering would come, but he trusted God's call. For the sake of Christ, he turned his back on being royal. Turning his back on the world, he knew God's glory would be unfurled. Through plagues and high seas, he saw God's blessing and believed. Through worship and praises, God loves to amaze us. When faced with Jericho's walls, Israel praised and saw their enemy fall. Even Rahab knew of God's power. When she protected his people, he protected her. Now the pace is gathering, so many in history leaning, straining. Can you feel the weight of it and the excitement that is building? None of these people saw what was coming, but each of them knew it was really something. You see, when God has a plan for the redemption of man, we may not know the how, but we do know He can. There's Gideon, Barak, Samson and Jephthah, and then David and Samuel and all of these prophets, mere mortals who fought and took on the giants. Kingdoms were won and blessings gained. Lions' roars silence and the quenching of flame. Their escape from the blade and His strength in their weakness, which was always displayed. Even when tortured, punished and slaughtered, staying true to the promise was all that mattered. There were many who died and suffered in obscurity, but their faith in that promise kept their hearts held in holy security. So how is it that all of these people of old believed in the promise that they had been told? None of them saw that promise fulfilled, yet to them this was no bitter pill. Until the time that God had appointed, they believed he would reveal his anointed. This blessing, this explosion of God's grace came through a baby born in a lowly place. And we, who see his face divine, from where love flows, can call him mine. This turning point in the world's history was from the beginning of time, God's great mystery. From here revealed in a lowly stable, redemption's plan is now enabled, and all of heaven is leaning in awe of God's plan to deal with sin. The fire of heaven is ignited on earth as God's plan is revealed through one simple birth.